Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Ag Forecast, brought to you by Agrible, the makers of Morning Farm Report. Our software gives growers the insights to make the best decisions possible about their operations. Well, we know how important the month of August is for soybean yields. So let's take a look here at soybean yield history for the United States. What I have here is a graph that starts in 1948 and goes to 2016 and shows you in this thick black line the year-to-year variability in soybean yields measured in bushels per acre. Now what I want you to see is I fitted this with a couple of different trend lines, but really it doesn't matter which one you use. Look at how far above trend 2016 was compared to all previous years. In fact, 2016's yield of 52.1 bushels per acre is 10% above the trend line, which was the second highest positive yield anomaly, with number one being 1994. You see, I want to show you this so you can also remember that last year's Brazil's crop was basically record smashing at 113.9 million metric tons of soybeans. You see, it's important to see this as we go into this month of August, as we're going to be watching the markets move, because we need to know how much grain was out there over the last year. What made 2016 so spectacular was this. What you're looking at here is the month of August 2016. This is a precipitation map, but the color coding expresses the percent of normal precipitation. So we're wetter than average in these colors, and we're drier than average in these colors. Now, first of all, down here in Louisiana, the rainfall that you see down here, which goes way off the top of the chart, this was actually about a $15 billion flood disaster. But if we move up the Mississippi River Valley into Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, Missouri, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and the Dakotas, even big chunks of Kansas, we see that a lot of the corn and soybean belt saw better than 100% of average precipitation. We know that more than average precipitation in the month of August is fantastic for producing out those beans as long as temperatures cooperate as well. And basically, August 2016 was nearly perfect for finishing off the really, really tall canopies of beans that we had. Keep this in mind as we get into our forecast for August 2017. We also have this for 2017. You got a couple of lines here on the graph. X-axis, 1980 to 2017. Y-axis, millions of acres here, okay? What we can see right now is that in 2017, soybean acres are way up at record high at 89.5 million acres, while corn are down slightly over last year. But these numbers are very, very close. It basically tells us there's about 180 million acres that are out there being farmed right now across the United States. Now, keep this in mind, because this basically tells us that if our soybean crop comes in huge, we're coming off of a huge year last year. Brazil had a huge year, so it's very, very important that we know exactly what to expect in terms of our precipitation for the month of August. Now, let's spread this out and look big picture first. I want you to look at the top graph first. What you got here is the Global Vegetation Health Index. This is a satellite-derived product. And before we look here at the United States, I want you to go check out a couple other places around the world. First, we know that China's major growing regions are right in through here, and there has been some drought stress the closer you get to Mongolia. But nearby Beijing, a little bit to the west of Beijing, there have been some pockets that have been doing quite well. But overall, there's still kind of a mixed bag of stress in through northeast China. And again, when you look at this map, we're looking for our values to get closer to 100 as being kind of in the best condition. Now let's slide over to Europe and Russia. Right now, the Russian wheat harvest is set to be huge, and this is because this particular region has not only been cool, but it's been wet, and that's been great for the production of their hard red winter wheat. There have been some pockets of stress in Ukraine, but not necessarily as widespread as other parts of Europe, like over here in France and Germany, right in through here. So there are some spots around the world that have been struggling with adverse weather. But if we come back to the United States, what I want you to see here is more or less the difference between July, the end of July here in 2017, and down here, which is July of 2016, the end of July 2016. Notice how much larger of a region in 2016 we had, basically showing up in really good conditions here compared to 17. You see, this is important as we get into kind of estimating both of these crop yields, both our corn and soybean. It's good to have a benchmark, and we know that 2016 was our biggest corn and soybean years, and that's what you can see here in the really a lot of blues. But look at this map for 2017, a little bit different story. So this is all set up. This is all what we're looking at as we move into the forecast. Now, the last 14 days have been quite interesting. Of course, we've seen this huge pattern shift over the last 4 to 5 days with that big low pressure system coming through, actually producing quite a bit of precipitation here in the Dakotas through Minnesota, Wisconsin, and dragging a cold front right here through the heart of the Corn Belt. But, did that rain really go a long way to offset the longer, drier trends? And this map would suggest that no, it really didn't, especially for folks in Iowa. We can see that the northern part of Missouri and Iowa over the last 2 weeks has been relatively dry compared to average. There's been some pockets elsewhere that have been dry too. So this is important to see because as we go into the month of August, as we continue in the month of August, I should say, these regions right in through here are some of our biggest soybean producing counties. So let's keep a close eye on this area as we move forward. Well, here's the setup this week. Our jet stream is basically following this black line, and that's going to be producing a rather large ridge that's going to be allowing for that heat to really build up the west coast of the United States. They've had excessive heat warnings and advisories out for the Northwest now for several days. Basically, this ridge has been in place. Well, this trough is basically what has happened in the flow of the jet stream that's allowed that cooler air to sink in. And what we're watching for is the setup of this rather large kind of ridge in the flow of the atmosphere. Now, what's interesting is this is not an upper level feature. This high pressure system I'm circling here is one near the surface, and it's being created by the flow of the atmosphere, which means that this high air pressure area actually slid south out of Canada. So what it's going to be doing is basically keeping in the cooler and clearer weather in through this part of our Corn Belt. But it will be around its periphery where things are going to get interesting because the flow around the periphery is basically going to be set up well to produce quite a bit of precipitation. And quickly before we leave this, right here we're looking at Tropical Storm Franklin. So here it is spinning on Tuesday after it crosses the Yucatan Peninsula. It's expected to remain at tropical storm strength before it kind of hits the Yucatan and then gets into central Mexico. Right now we're not forecasting this to really interact much with Texas or any point further to the north. So keep an eye on it though over the next few days. But remember, this high pressure system, this lower level ridging in the atmosphere, is what is going to be basically guiding our precipitation over the coming days. And here's what I'm talking about. This is an animation. Let's stop it out about a week here. And what you just saw is the precipitation build up kind of all along the periphery of that high. So you can see a lot of rain here. We're talking, some locations getting better than 1.5 to 2.5 inches of rain. The model's picking up on some heavier spots here, but that's just it, kind of trying to initialize thunderstorms. But generally, what we see here is wet along the periphery of the high for most of this week, but potentially some drier weather in here where it has been dry. Now, middle of the week, toward the end of the week, I am watching something that could be sliding out of Kansas, Nebraska, into Missouri and Illinois, but got to keep a closer eye on that as we get into the middle of our week. But we could see a rather dry stretch of time here, right where I'm kind of drawing through the I-states, getting back up into Minnesota and the Dakotas. Got to watch this area right here this week for being dry and the potential for flooding all around its periphery. Very, very wet in through this area. Now, just to show you that there is some model agreement, this is the next week's forecast. So this gets us basically through Sunday of next week. You can clearly see the same pattern. Look at the wetter than average conditions all around the periphery of that high. And again, notice how it's got a big chunk of Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana drier than average. And this same region has been dry for the last 15 days or so. So we got to keep an eye on this and see where those storms do set up and if they do come in through the I-states and through here. Now, as we stretch this out over the next month, just to bring to your attention the latest long-range forecast by the European model, basically primarily due to the really heavy rains we're expecting over the next 10 days or so, we're seeing this very wet bias into parts of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, also getting back into Kansas and Texas. And this same region here is actually going to be experiencing some cooler than average conditions as well. But we'll talk about this again in a moment. Notice too that we see that a lot of the Corn Belt and a lot of the primary soybean growing regions in through here are forecast to have a slightly wetter than average month as forecast by the European model, but this is not looking as wet as it was in 2016, which basically sent us off to that record-breaking crop. So it's very important to see that for the month of August, even though we're not calling for big dry anomalies in through this area, although it could be dry over the next, let's call it 5 to 6 days across the I-states, in this part of the I-states at least. Overall, the month is, in the long range here is not looking too shabby, but not nearly as wet as 2016. Certainly it's going to be cool though, and that's what we see right in through here. Now, some of the longer range data that we have here getting into the 3rd and 4th weeks of August do suggest we may briefly see that ridge translate to the east, bringing in some heat into this part of the Corn Belt. But we're watching that closely to see how things shake out. Coming in at the end of August like that, that's not nearly as big of a threat to our crops, though, as if that came in like it did in the 3rd and 4th weeks of July. But overall, we have a pretty cool pattern setting up for the month of August. Now, just remember, I know I'm showing you a lot of model output here, but we do look at other techniques like our persistence techniques, our analog forecasts, and other techniques. And there's some pretty strong agreement that this is going to be the overall pattern, at least for the next 2 weeks. We'll take a closer look at this each video as we move forward. One last thing I have to bring up here, while Franklin is spinning here in the Caribbean, it's going to go across the Yucatan and then eventually into Mexico. The tropics are getting active. This is called Invest 99L. And right now, while we only have about a 40% chance of seeing this thing continue to develop as it moves toward the Lesser Antilles, it's just that time of year that we have to watch this closely. And I'll just say this, some of the models do suggest that as this system tries to battle some less than favorable conditions that are currently set up right through here, it may invigorate again the remnants of it as it gets north of the Bahamas over toward the East Coast. We just have to watch these things because they can really take shape quickly and impact U.S. agriculture. So keep a close eye on the National Hurricane Center every day if you live in a region that's prone to getting hit by some tropical weather. And with that, I'll go ahead and finish up this video. We hope you look forward to Agrible's next ag forecast on Thursday. To get morning farm report for your operations, complete with a daily email that shows a snapshot of your field conditions each morning, go to morningfarmreport.com. Sign up for that free account. Full grower accounts are free if you sign up for our Sustainable Yield program or for our growers who work with 80 merchandisers. Thank you, and I look forward to talking to you again on Thursday.